Good morning. My name is Caitlin Mertzlufft, and I'm a second-year student in the geography department here in Icon, of course. And I'm going to be talking to you today about my thoughts on this One Health paradigm. And this is really a theoretical trajectory that I've been working through in the last year that is informing the direction I'm taking on my dissertation. So I'm a geographer, and my background is in geography, but it's also in public health, and particularly in epidemiology. And so what I'm interested in is the geography of disease, particularly infectious disease. And these are diseases which are transmissible from one organism to another, as opposed to something like cancer, which is a within-host illness. And within this broader umbrella of infectious disease, I am particularly interested in diseases that are transmissible between species. So these are termed zoonotic disease, or zoonoses in the plural, and these are things that we are all familiar with. Ebola, of course, which is what the picture from my title slide was taken from, the most recent West African outbreak. Measles, which is all over the media right now. Swine flu, etc. So these comprise 75% of emerging or re-emerging infectious diseases, and I think this statistic is taken from the 70s. At one point, we sort of figured with antibiotics and medical advancements, infectious disease was sort of on the way out, but that is very much not true. Also, the diseases that are currently known to affect humans, nearly 1,500, again, a majority of these are zoonotic diseases. So these are really things that we're dealing with all the time. One way of addressing these is through this idea of One Health. And this is something that has been really touted by the disciplines of public health, human medicine, and veterinary medicine. And it's this idea that animal health, human health, and environmental health are all inherently related. It's the same pathogens working within this broader environment, and to just address one of these singly is to miss the broader problem. So these really need to be addressed in a holistic manner. And I want to reiterate, when I say human and animal and environmental, these aren't just some nebulous other. So this is my family. It's my dad and my stepmom and one of my aunts. That's my cat. And this is the view from my aunt and uncle's backyard in the mountains. And if you want to talk about exurbanization, that's another discussion that we can talk about at a break. But really, this is all of us. This is our community. This is our families, our pets. This is something that we are all dealing with on an everyday basis. And even things that are this other, some other country, that's going to hop on a plane and arrive in Atlanta tomorrow. So this is a closely connected environment. And this idea particularly of human and animal health goes back centuries, and particularly the disciplines of human and veterinary medicine are very closely related and used to have a very close collaboration before they became more siloed in the last century. But this guy, Rudolf Virchow, he's the father of, when I say contemporary medicine, comparative medicine, I'm sorry, has said that between animal and human health, there is no dividing line, and nor should there be. And this is really getting at the idea that particularly, even today, within human and veterinary medicine, the body of scholarship and the training is actually very similar, and it's just practiced on different species. And so this idea of One Health, which has really seen a resurgence in the last decade and has gone this global appeal and this global buzzword, again, directed primarily through public health, which is where I heard of it, human medicine and veterinary medicine, this resurged because of the zoonotic outbreaks around the turn of the millennium, things like mad cow disease, SARS, Nipah virus. This really put a lot of funding and global, crap, we should be looking into this, and we should be looking at why people are getting sick and these animals are getting sick. So on the one hand, this has really expanded the definition of health, as opposed to just this clinical, you either have this illness or you don't. And if you don't have an illness, then you're fine. It's more of a, what's the well-being? What makes people happy? What makes people productive? There's this topic called zoaya, which I think is kind of cool, and it's sort of the counterpart to zoonoses, and it's the mutual benefit of human-animal interaction. So sort of you and your dog and the mutual benefits you're getting out of being with each other, which I think is kind of cool. Also, this has resulted in a surge of multidisciplinary training and academic programs, again, mostly within these three disciplines, and of research projects. So I came in wanting to work on One Health. I'm like, what happens if I look at this with my geography perspective, and how can I combine the two? But the more I started looking into this, the more flaws I found and the more concerned I was with exactly how this was being done. I argue that this is really overtly anthropocentric. Even though you're looking at these three elements, all of these disciplines, and I think it's primarily because of their disciplinary background and their epistemologies, are looking at this human-based notion of illness. Even veterinary medicine, which deals with animals, are working with animals that are important to humans, either our companion species, our livestock, or once upon a time, our transportation. And I think because of this, the ecological health has really been neglected. So the environmental health that is touted is really just the context for the animal health and the human health. So I'm really interested in these questions of society and nature. And what is the connection between humans and nature? Stephen Colbert will tell you that we have dominion over nature. I really like this. I spent like hours on the internet trying to find this at one point because I knew I'd seen it. I'm like, I need this for my talks. So I would argue that One Health and Stephen Colbert are sort of following this ego framework. And I'm more interested in this eco framework, and to take the human out of the privileged position and the a priori state, and to look at it within us and others within sort of a more truly comprehensive system. So in other words, what I'm really arguing is that although One Health is meant to be more inclusive, I think that they are enforcing separation instead by relegating actors into one of three categories, either human or animal or environmental, and by prioritizing human health a priori. And I think that this oversimplifies the dynamics of zoonotic disease and our mitigation approaches, possibly. Because I'm thinking, at this point, one, you are losing sight of the interactions that are happening within these categories as well as between. And also the slightly problematic distinction that humans are animals, so why are we in two separate categories? And what happens if we put everybody together? I argue instead that interspecies disease transmission is co-produced. And what I mean by that, as opposed to humans going into an environment and getting sick, I want to know, why are we in that environment to begin with, and why are we coming into contact with these pathogens? I think this is a much more complex system of an iterative system, really, of contact. So I think that a better approach to understanding zoonotic disease is to look at a network and putting all players, humans and other species, and actually taking components of environmental health, the trees, the waterways, adding all these into a network and giving everybody, if not equal power, at least, everything agency, and starting everybody off on this equal framework. And looking at the associations that bring these into being. Again, why are we coming into contact with these things in these particular locations? And also looking at how other factors influence this, not just the biology, but the social, cultural, political, and economic factors that are influencing these conversations and these interactions. So I'm intending to look at this through Chagas disease in Panama. And Chagas disease is a vector-borne infectious disease, which means that it is transmitted between species by bug. And it's a triatomine bug, which generally feeds on small mammals, but occasionally feeds on humans as well. And I think that this is particularly interesting in Panama because these bugs tend to live in palm trees. And these palm trees are associated with secondary growth that happens after humans move in and tear down the first things that are already there for agricultural reasons. So I think there's some really compelling things going on here. And I'm still working on specifics, but my overall questions right now in this region, and with this in mind, I'm curious in looking at how the habitat availability and preference of both these bugs and their small mammals that they feed on interact with the social, political, and economic drivers of the human activity in the region and historical human activity in the region, and asking how this varies across both cultural and environmental gradients. And I'm wondering if we look at disease in this way, how can that address how we actually go about mitigating these diseases, as opposed to just looking at the biology? And again, I'm working on taking these apart into things that I can actually go out into the field and measure, because this is like huge. But yeah, so that's what I'm working on now. And there's a triatomine bug. Thanks, guys.
friends from ecological perspectives live under the apparent delusion that they are really integrating environment into things. Is the rhetoric really dominated by public health, or are there some people who are successfully thinking about the types of feedbacks that you're talking about?
It is within the One Health banner. It really is dominated by One Health, and even veterinary and human doctors have fallen out. There's been pushes to bring them back in and to bring in ecologists. There are other interdisciplinary movements that are not under the One Health banner, eco-health, eco-medicine, that are taking more of an ecology approach to it, and those are mainly made up of disease ecologists and biologists. I argue that they are still pretty anthropocentric, though, and so, because everyone's just mainly worried about the human aspect of zoonotic disease and not, what are we doing to the environment too, and how is this cyclically moving things along.
Yeah. Totally sympathize with your arguments about the cons, and I live this every day in that our problem is really all about money.
Yeah.
And so I'm just wondering, because to be perfectly honest, the concepts of looking at eco-health, One Health, etc., is something that we do every day.
Definitely.
But unfortunately, it is 100% driven by money, and I'm just wondering if there is a way for you to incorporate how funding or the flow of money in the economy actually dictates these conceptual ways of thinking, because that's what we find. I mean, we all have projects where our focus would be on the environment and the wildlife itself, but if we don't relate it to public health,
of course,
we don't get the funds. So it would be nice to sort of find a fresh new way to get attention otherwise.
I agree, and I think that is really what drove this resurgence of the One Health name, because everyone put money into that, so then people started going down that. And I think that question, too, is something that we worry and think about in ICON a lot, since we are trying to bridge disciplines in new ways. Like, how does that actually fit into the funding mechanism, and how can we move forward with this? But that's an excellent point.
Hi. So I don't know that there's an exact answer for this, but with the human population, exploding as it has over the past couple of centuries, and then looking at ego versus eco, what's the correct number of percentage, to say, well, okay, this is relegated to, ecosystems, or this is relegated to, human, habitat, or, what's a good number for us to live happily and healthy?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that I could give you a good number, and I'm trying to not get on the soapbox, actually, with that, because I feel very strongly about this whole nature-society dichotomy, and I argue that it's a false dichotomy. But I think people worry about that all the time, and that's something that everyone is struggling with, and how do you go about it? Because you don't want to kick people off land and say that we're just going to keep this for, pristineness. But it's something that we're still working towards. It's problematic. That's a good question. I think that's something that we are all trying to answer in different ways.